welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm so pleased that today we're joined by author Deborah Wilde to talk about her novel Big Demon Energy.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see how long I manage to not jump into talking about this book. But before we get there, what's something great that happened recently?
Oh, well, so I love trip planning, and I've been invited to go as one of the authors signing in Edinburgh at Rare in September. And I just booked my flights, and that means I get to go into hardcore trip planning.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm so excited.
That sounds like so much fun.
That really does.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Sarah, how about you? Anything as exciting as that?
Not as exciting as a trip to Edinburgh, but I'm very pleased with it regardless. I discovered, well, when I say discovered, I watched a YouTube video on a different way to purl, and it does not hurt my carpal tunnel as much. So I'm happy.
That's awesome.
That is very good.
Yeah.
Should we put the link in the description for all?
We can. It's a very long video and talks a lot about things that are not relevant to this new purling method, but
yeah. I'm just happy that there's sunshine out today. I'm gonna be honest. I live in Seattle, and so every sunny day is a good day.
Oh, hang on. I'm in Vancouver and it's gray out here.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I love Seattle. I always go visit the Fremont Troll when I come down.
Yes, he's delightful.
He really is.
It was so much fun. I actually went to Vancouver for the first time in September, and we stayed near Stanley Park. So when we got to that part of the book, I was like, I know where that is.
That's awesome.
Anyway, see, I couldn't help myself. We're already talking about the book. We have 2 more questions first. What's everyone drinking for this lovely recording?
I'm water, just water.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm drinking a spin on Earl Grey. It's called Dorian Grey. And I thought it was appropriately fancy. The characters do go to England and drink some tea, so I thought black tea would be a good fit for this.
I am drinking a green tea that I bought in Japantown a couple of months ago because it is gray and rainy, and it felt like a green tea kind of day.
Fair. Green tea is lovely.
Mm-hmm. We're very firmly West Coast on this recording. Sarah's San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm just going to brag again about that I got all the sunshine.
Yes, seriously.
But I mean, California needs the rain, so I'm not complaining.
Oh, of course.
And it's not actually raining in Vancouver, so it's just gray. So, you know, it's all okay.
All right, I'll stop rubbing it in. So this is actually a book podcast, not a knitting podcast or a tea podcast. Surprise.
Just you wait.
There's knitting in my book.
There is.
There is, and I loved it. And we do have a question about that later on.
Okay.
So other than Big Demon Energy, has anyone read anything good lately?
I just finished Iron Flame, the sequel to Fourth Wing.
Oh, yeah. How did you like it?
Oh my God, I loved it. And I'm not a dragon story person generally, but I devoured Fourth Wing and then I was very excited. My only thing was, at first I was scrambling to remember what had happened because it'd been a few months, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. That author just knows how to keep me turning the pages as quickly as possible.
Yeah, they're definitely fun books.
Yeah.
I'm still reading the first Crescent City book by Sarah J. Maas.
Okay.
My goal was to read books 1 and 2 before the third one came out because I have some friends who are like super into Sarah J. Maas and they're all reading book 3 right now. And I wanted to be able to click on their spoiler tags in Discord and see what they were talking about. But I didn't get there. So I'm still working on book 1.
I've been reading Big Demon Energy by Deborah Wilde.
Excellent.
Yes. Oh man, this is like the exact kind of book that I love. There's like a lot of action and adventure, but also really sexy love interests. So I could not put it down. Luckily, I had the ebook, which meant it was never far away from me because it was on my phone. So I was like in between meetings at work, like, what's happening next?
Oh, thank you so much. That just totally made my entire weekend.
So I know what genre I would consider this, but genre definitions do vary quite broadly from reader to reader and from person to person.
Yeah.
What would you consider Big Demon Energy?
Urban fantasy. I'd say all my books are urban fantasy. Now, that said, they have very heavy subplots of romance, but it's funny because I've been talking with a lot of authors about this. I wouldn't say they're romantasy because I don't think they have that sort of epic fantasy kingdom kind of aspect to it that I think romantasy has to it. And I don't think they're PNR because you could pull out the romance and you would still have a fully formed urban fantasy plot for each book and across the entire series.
Question, what does PNR stand for?
Sorry, paranormal romance.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. I would agree with you then. It felt
Yeah.
almost like the romance was like icing on the cake in this book. Now, I also eat all of the icing off of a cake, which I
Me
think tells you
too.
a lot about.
Me too. Which probably says how and why I'm writing it like this. I do love my icing.
And okay, so this is kind of a silly thing to say. Bear with me because it's very obvious. But it was so nice to finally read a vampire book that didn't just bring Christianity into it.
Thank you. You know, it's funny. I actually stayed away from vampires for my first couple of series because I didn't think I had anything to add to the conversation. And it took me a while to figure out how I would want to play with them and introduce them into a world of my creating that made it relevant to me.
This book has so much Jewish culture in it, but was very welcoming to a reader like myself who doesn't have like a lot of background knowledge.
Oh, good.
So it's still like, there were a couple of points in this book where I highlighted something and was like, oh, I have to look that up later. And then I didn't because within like 5 pages, you told me what was going on. I appreciated it a lot.
Thank you. I've worked very hard on finding the balance between, because I know for many readers who are new to me, I'm going to be introducing them to mythologies that they're not familiar with. So I have spent a lot of time really trying to craft the balance of info dumping and, being interesting and just being able to parse it out as needed and to know the points where I better flag this now because it's going to start to become confusing, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you did a really excellent job. And you made some points about vampires and how they're based on Jewish stereotypes that I hadn't thought of before. So it was really, really well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a lot of fun with research. I do love my research.
I had no idea that blood wasn't kosher. For some reason, that's never come up when I've been meal planning or picking a restaurant with friends.
Right? I mean, it's not a thing on Yelp.
Yeah.
Yeah, the blood libel is a big thing and has been historically used for propaganda against the Jews. And so it was very interesting to feed that back into the vampire mythology.
So you write a lot of urban fantasy. I believe this is your 5th series.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how you keep your different series feeling different and fresh?
So they all predominantly are set in Vancouver, but they're all very different versions of Vancouver in that some have hidden aspects to my city, or the magic system is very different in every single series I write. Some have demons, or some have vampires, or some have shifters. One of them, plus its spin-off, so my Jezebel Files, it's only humans that have magic. There's no supernatural creatures at all. So I always try to do something a little different every time I start a new series, mostly just to keep myself interested. And then, hopefully that spins out to the reader, but I don't want to be bored. I don't want to feel like I'm just retreading the same ground for myself.
And then you throw vampires into the mix, and that opens a whole new door.
And then I throw vampires into the mix. Yeah.
The world in this book in particular felt very familiar. I mean, it does have magical elements, but there wasn't a ton of like high tech or high magic gadgets flying around. I mean, there was the vampire sort of bubble universe that felt very different, but that was a whole different universe, so that made sense. But otherwise, like I could definitely like see Aviva interacting with this world, and I was like, yeah, I live there. That could be where our universe. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Yes, I don't tend to do a lot of super magical gadgets. I tend to mostly stick with some basic weapons that just don't tend to include guns and things just because I don't know how to use them and I know I'll just get all the details wrong. So, basic things, but just mostly inherent magic because for me, I just like writing that. Although I will say with Aviva, her inherent magic is not offensive. It's more defensive, which she manipulates and she does kind of, she can use it to push people to an edge, but it's not like where I've had other people who can, manifest their blood into a physical object or shoot lightning or something like that. Yeah.
I loved the magic system in this book. There were, was it 5 different flames, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's all based on the Hanukkah flame. So Aviva is a Maccabee, which is what I call the modern magical police organization. That's a global organization. and they're named Maccabees because they take their name after the heroes of the Hanukkah story, but also because their magic actually came from that miraculous Hanukkah flame that burned for 8 days and 8 nights. So each different subset of magic within this flame-based magic system is based on a property of fire.
I loved the flame system. And talking about it, I was wondering, if you had a flame, what color would it be and why?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think you'd probably want me to stay away from the red flame, which is the flame that you can just physically touch and it'll burn things up, because I have a feeling my quick temper would just cause a lot of damage and that would be bad. I think white flame, the ability to sort of power emotion, could be very interesting to have, to play with, to make things white hot. So whether that's desire or jealousy, or I think that could be very interesting, especially as a writer, if I could somehow channel that into the books.
I was gonna say, yeah, you kind of have that power already,
In my head. Thank you.
playing with our emotions as readers. I would definitely go yellow flame, which was the purification cleansing power, because then I'd never have acne again.
Oh yeah, see, that would be a good one.
Yeah.
I would definitely, I think, want the red flame because at one point in the book, Satya uses it to heat up her burrito.
Oh, that's the orange flame.
Orange flame.
Yeah,
Yes, orange flame.
pulling heat in or out of things.
And yeah, that's what I would want because, I drink so much tea. It would be nice to be able to heat it to the right temperature all the time without having to go put it in the microwave or whatever. So,
Or wait for it to cool down if it's too hot. Yeah.
well, I never wait for it to cool down. I just drink it hot. But yeah, that would be a useful skill. And I appreciated Satya using it in that way because I was like, that's relatable.
Very practical. Yeah.
I always like reading about people who include their magic in very ordinary ways, like authors who do that. So, I was thinking about, okay, how can I do that? And for Sachi, it was like, yeah, she's totally just going to be sitting there and heat up her burrito because she doesn't want to move.
Yeah. So at the beginning of this book, I was in the middle of trying to formulate a comment or question about how it reminded me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then Aviva made her first direct reference. And I was like, oh, you said it, so I don't have to.
Buffy may or may not have had a very profound influence on my life.
Oh no, is it a spoiler? Never mind, I won't talk about it. One of the references I was going to mention, I won't say anything. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. I think, from a storytelling perspective, like as much as I love every character on Buffy and she's kick-ass and, I love the found family and the friendships and everything, when I've examined what was done sort of thematically on a storytelling level, like the way that in the story room they would say, okay, what is a problem that people face as teenagers? And then how do we craft the monster to represent that? Like I just think that was there's so much to just learn and parse out from that series, aside from it being incredibly entertaining.
Absolutely. And there were some elements of that in this book as well. You sort of used fantasy elements like vampires and Shedim. Is that how to pronounce that word?
Shadim.
Shadim. Okay.
I say Shadim, but my Hebrew is horrible, so please, anybody who's actually speaks Hebrew, please forgive me.
Which is the demons in this book, or
yeah,
called Shadim, are used to explore real world issues like racism and bigotry, which I thought was a very nice metaphor.
I think for me that comes from my love of sci-fi, and I was raised on Star Trek and I read a lot of sci-fi. Just being able to use these quote unquote alien races to explore real world issues and prejudices and problems. So yeah, for me, that anything that becomes supernatural is fair game to explore things we're really dealing with in the here and now.
So this is a little bit of a change from that kind
On
of
a
more
lighter
serious,
note.
kind of more serious topic. But you did mention that there's a character in this book who knits, Ezra knits, and that was one of my favorite aspects of him. What is his favorite thing to knit?
I think he stress knits a lot of socks. I don't know why. But like with lots of different colors and where the heels are different colored and they match the toes. Like I think he stress knits these really short. Well, for him, I don't actually know how long it takes. I'm a terrible knitter. I have so much respect for people who can knit, but I think he stress knits these very short things. But then if he's stressed for a long time, like the projects grow bigger, and it'll be like, okay, now he's into, maybe a blanket and then a complicated sweater. And then, I'm not sure what his biggest project is. Like if he's got like a knit, I know he did knit himself in book 2. I mean, this isn't a spoiler. It's just there's a robe he's wearing and it's a knit robe. So he probably knit himself like it's like a boxer's wrap with an oversized hood. So he was probably really stressed out for a while when he did that one.
I love that.
That's like a wonderful measurement of like there's even a Silas, his sort of maybe not best friend, but his companion in this book.
It is his best
It
friend.
is,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It mentions like, oh, is this a sock kind of stress,
Yeah.
or is this a that kind? And I was just like, that's wonderful. What a great gauge of your friend's like emotional state.
Yeah. And it's excellent too for him. I don't think this is a spoiler because I think it's in the synopsis for the book blurb that Ezra is a prime. He's one of the very, very, very rare born vampires. So, here's this absolute pinnacle of predatory, lethal vampire. And, his go-to de-stressor is knitting. It just made me very happy to think about him doing that.
And it makes him such a more interesting and dynamic character. I mean, obviously he's a hunky vampire, very important, but he's not just like a two-dimensional like masculinity cardboard cutout.
Yeah, and I mean, sexy for me, sexy is a person funny? What interests do they have? I think that's true for all of us. It's like, yeah, okay, the six-pack ab or the whatever, that's fine, and we enjoy those in our fictional heroes, but we want them to feel like a rounded out person that we're going to be attracted to, not just like a photograph. Because again, he has to sustain, as the romantic lead, he has to sustain our interest over this series is going to be 6 books. So,
well, I think we're about to get to our spoiler conversation.
Oh, okay.
But before we do, I actually have a question for Sarah. Sarah, who should read this book?
You should read this book if you want mystery, adventure, sexy vampires who knit, and who doesn't want all of that.
Yeah.
So you should read this book.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers.
Okay, so what was your Buffy spoiler comment?
Oh, the angel becoming Angelus when Buffy sleeps with him for the first time. I guess that's not really a spoiler. We knew that Ezra was her ex.
Yeah.
But at the point in the book where we get that reference, enough has been built up about their relationship. And like that was such a nice sort of like not slow reveal, but slow build of finding out about their history that I didn't want to just jump to. Also, he flipped on her like a switch. Guess what, everyone?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I would say that's a bit of a spoiler. Yes, because he does. So this is the spoiler talk. So the spoiler is Aviva has carried this secret that she is half demon, half Shadim her entire life. Only her mother knows, and her mother, who is also her boss as a Maccabee, she's the chapter director for Vancouver, has trained Aviva her entire life to keep this hidden on pain of death kind of thing. And so she's kept it hidden from everyone, including her lifetime best friend. But there was one person she chose to tell, and that was Ezra. And he seemed very lovely about it the night it happened. And the next morning it was, scorched earth, we're done, no explanation.
I have so many questions about how that relationship ended, because obviously in this book, we get it from Aviva's perspective, and she was very understandably quite hurt. But we get hints that from Ezra that, there's more to the story than that. So I'm looking forward to learning more in books 2 through 6.
Yeah, there is more that comes out in book 2, and I'm very excited about book 2. It's going to have its early release February 26th on my bookstore, and then it goes wide on the 18th of March, but it really kind of blew everything up to a whole new level. And then in book 3 is where I've just started writing book 3, and that's where Aviva starts to put together a lot more pieces about what happened.
I feel like we've gotten some breadcrumbs already.
Yes.
There were a couple of lines from Ezra and from Silas where I was like, that's going to come back later.
Yeah. Some of them are deliberate, and then some of them I wrote them and I went, oh crap, I guess I need to figure out how that's relevant now.
Well, sort of playing off of that, were there any sort of scenes or moments in this book that surprised you as you wrote them?
I'm going to say yes, there probably were, but I tend to delete the books after I've written them and I move on to the next one. And now that I'm in book 3, I'm like, I don't remember if there are. I'm sure there would have been, because there's always a point at which a character in the book will surprise me. I don't think there was anything like super extreme when I was writing Big Demon Energy. Like, I know I've had books where they did something and I was so angry, I literally just killed off like a main character just for a few days because I was so angry at them. And then I went back and fixed it. So nobody did anything that bad that angered their god that much.
How different, so you might not necessarily remember this if, as you say, you kind of delete the book and move on.
Like you took the test and were like, wipe it from my memory.
Pretty much, yeah.
But how different is the final product from the first draft? Like, did the mystery change at all as you wrote it? Did your plan
No.
for the series change at all as you wrote it?
No. So one thing I'll say, I come from a screenwriting background. So I was a screenwriter for 12 years. So what that gave me was an amazing foundation in structure. My plots don't tend to change a lot. What will happen between, my first and second. So I'll do 2 very major drafts. So there's the first draft and then a major rewrite on it. And I will really dig into theme and what I'm exploring with theme. So that wouldn't have been there in the first draft. And then sort of my line edits are more for where the comedic or sexy times or sexual tension moments that I can dig into.
We've talked about this a little bit, but Ezra, the main love interest, is an ex of Aviva.
Yeah.
So how did that choice of giving them a history affect the romance in this novel?
So with every series, I have picked a romance trope that I want to write. And I do tend to love my enemies to lovers just because I love the antagonism. But I thought it would be really, I was thinking a lot about Aviva. She's 30, she's got some very definite career goals for herself. She's quite mature. And I thought it'd be very interesting to pull a second chance romance into her life so that it's not a fresh, oh, I just met this dude and he's driving me crazy and I want to kill him. It's like, this is the person who wounded her, more than anybody, who made her feel more raw, who she had to pick herself up off the floor. And I thought for Aviva in particular, this would be the right way to go, is to bring her past back to hit her in the face, especially when everything she's trying to do is to prove herself as a Maccabee so that when she does come out to the world as half demon in a world that just views all demons as unequivocally evil and says there's no way that anybody who has any demonic blood could be good because their evil trumps any humanity, she's doing all of this so she can come out, so she can still, earn people's respect and make it so other people like her won't ever have to experience what she experienced. So to have the fact that it's this one person who she chose to share this secret with, who's upending her life now, made it almost the only choice for me in terms of the romance with Aviva. Yeah.
I really loved I would say probably the main character arc of this book, to me anyway, was Aviva sort of accepting her demon half and sort of feeling better about herself. There was a line at the end. I highlighted it.
Excellent.
I didn't simply like and tolerate my Shadim side. I relished it, was one of her comments near the end. And that just made me feel very happy for her, because it's something that she struggles with through the whole book and clearly, her whole life. Just to have her sort of be more at peace with herself and her identity felt very triumphant, even though this book leaves a lot left for us waiting for book 2.
Yeah, so in the very first series I wrote, which was the Unlikable Demon Hunter books, the best friend is half goblin, half demon. And she's younger. She's like 20, 21 when it starts. So she's in a very different place with her acceptance. And then I did write a single spin-off book where she comes to terms with that side of her. And I kind of felt like, well, okay, again, Aviva is 30. She's at a very different place in her life, that there would be an acceptance, but that there's a difference between, I accept this side of me, but I need to keep it tightly leashed. And there's going to be benefits to, that there's a positive quality to her Shadeen, who she has called Cherry Bomb, the Brimstone Baroness. So yeah, so that she has accepted Cherry and, and sort of made as much peace as she can with her at the beginning, but to actually acknowledge that, yeah, there's actually some good qualities and I do love this side of me, was sort of the smaller journey she needed to take in this book.
I think for me, one of the things that I liked about that arc was at the beginning. I mean, even though she acknowledges that Cherry Bomb is her and there's not actually a separation, it still feels like they're very separate. And then that changes over the course of the novel. So I really appreciated that, showing that she is acknowledging that side of her more.
Thank you. Yeah. And for me, so to speak to that, it was important that she actually have a moment where she literally is unable to feel a separation. So when she goes into Babel, which is the vampire megacity, it's like suddenly she is like, there's no difference. She is snapped into that physical form. Their thinking is it's just one and the same. And so I think that was a very important experience for her that she'd never had on Earth or in our reality.
One of the very interesting tensions of this book is Sachi, her best friend, and how she is so entirely on Aviva's side. I love her giving Aviva shit for clearly falling back in love with Ezra over time. That was very good best friend moment. But still, that struggle with Sachi is very anti-demon. And so that sort of tension between I trust her with my life, but I don't trust her with this half of me, it makes it like a very complex feeling.
Yeah, and this continues. It does start to come to a bit more of a pointed edge in book 3. But, for me, Sachi is somebody. So, there are the human Maccabees who are all people with magic. And then there are the Maccabees who are vampires, and there's not very many of them. Lots of them had been operatives who ended up being turned, but those people go into sort of a subsection called the Spook Squad, and they're the ones who deal with other rogue vamps and demons. And Sachi has wanted to be part of this. She has a bloodthirsty edge, and she's really wanted to go out and like fight demons and vamps. And for me, what's interesting is I think is watching her struggle with this desire to do good in the world and rid the world of evil. But then it's easy when it's a bad vamp actor or it's a demon, and I don't think she's ever had to consider, infernals, the half demon humans before, because they're so rare and they stay hidden. So she's never come up against that before. So this book is really the first place where her moral code and what justice and what doing good and keeping humanity safe means starts to get tested.
I feel like it's also hard because at a certain point in their investigation where Aviva is like, no, all of the people who are being killed, who we have previously determined were being killed because they were so good, like they're actually all half demons. And then she kind of, well, she doesn't walk it back, but she can't necessarily confirm her claim without outing herself. And so I feel like Sachi doesn't have to confront that disconnect between what she believes about infernals versus what they have been seeing through the course of their investigation.
And I think had there been a moment when that all comes out that Sachi had said, you know what? Oh my goodness, this completely changes my viewpoint on infernals. And, oh, obviously they can be good people, but she qualifies it in the moment. She says, well, okay, these ones were good, but, like, what are the
One
chances?
of the good ones.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, we had like, 3 good ones. Oh, well, so I think to Aviva, it's just a doubling down on, yeah, I am right not to tell Sachi because this will go terrible for me if I do.
And I'm very interested to see in further books more from Michael, Aviva's mother, because I really can't tell what her deal is at this point.
My editor keeps giving me that note, even in book 2. She's like, I don't know. She goes, I love this. I have no idea. Yeah, trust me, you will. That whole what is Michael up to really starts to come out as well in book 2. Yeah, it's there. I promise. You will get more of that.
In particular, because when Aviva brings up that all of these very good people were half demon, her mother is just like hand waves it away entirely. It's just like, it doesn't matter. And I was like, oh, stab me in the gut. Harsh.
And I think too, again, there is a balancing act for Michael. On the one hand, she is a director of a Maccabee chapter, and it is her job to make sure people are safe. And common thinking is that most infernals are not good. And even with her own daughter, she has tried to keep that part of Aviva suppressed and controlled. And here's the training to control her. And here's how you manage that. She's never accepted it as a part of Aviva. And I think the flip side of that is, here's a woman who had a one night stand, and then suddenly, most infernals are not carried to term. And so she suddenly finds out that the person that, she A, got knocked up by, but B, he was a demon. And so her sense of betrayal, and how much has Aviva been living kind of with the trauma of Michael's own sense of betrayal from that whole event?
It's funny because in the very beginning of the story, I definitely felt like Aviva's first person perspective meant that we were seeing Michael in an unnecessarily negative light. Like there was a lot going on there that Aviva just couldn't recognize because she was coming to terms with herself and with the way that she'd been raised, where Michael was actually doing her best. But as the story progressed, I became less and less sure of that. And I have a lot of questions about Michael too.
I think there's an aspect of Michael's definitely covering her own butt too.
Yeah.
Again, she doesn't want to buck the system and buck the conventional wisdom and risk everything she's done for herself. And there's also, even if she is doing certain things for the right reasons, I mean, she's doing them out of fear. She's not saying, okay, we're going to find the courage to bring you, all of you, or bring your whole half Shadim side into the light and find the resources and support and the way to change thinking. Even her maternal protective instincts, which she definitely has, are, this is how I keep you safe. We hide it. And if it helps me in the process, that's not a bad thing either.
It definitely feels like she wants to work within the system, whereas
Mhm.
Aviva wants to change the system.
Yeah. Michael doesn't want to change the system. Michael rooted out corruption in the system, but it was still, sort of through, I'm going to say, official means. Like, it wasn't something that was so outside the box thinking, like infernals are good or could be good. It was still root out the corruption from within, probably through official means and investigations and all of that.
We need to do things more by the book, not
Yeah,
less.
exactly.
One of the things I really loved, there's a very complex relationship between Aviva and Ezra, of course, given their history.
Mhm.
But it felt like one of the things they really, not necessarily bonded over, but had in common and made me feel as a reader like I can totally see these two people having a partnership, is how upset they get when people accuse them of just like riding their parents' coattails. There's a few times in this book where someone says like, "Oh, it's, you're only here because of nepotism." And they both bristle so much at that. If it was like, yeah, I could totally see them having that in common, and having a deeper relationship and not just being very attracted to each other.
I find in dealing with writing a second chance romance, those commonalities, especially in where it pertains to self-perception and how they move through the world, become even more important to me than if they had just met on this case for the first time. Because there has to be something that the reader is recognizing as so genuine in their connection that it can overcome all the hurt feelings of the past 6 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, they can't just both be really hot, right? They have to have a reason
Yeah,
to get
or,
back together.
oh, we both like this kind of music. It's like, no, there has to be some very, very, it can be superficial. There has to be, some really fundamental truths about the two of them that connect them, that readers can go, oh, okay, I get this. Yeah, and I'll root for this because it feels real.
One thing that we only get hints of that I'm very excited that I feel like is coming are some of the side romances.
I do love my side romances.
We were just barely teased in this book. Now, you don't have to spoil anything, but can you tell us maybe what we have to look forward to later in the series?
Oh, I will say that Silas and Darsh are going to take you on a wild ride.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, there's so in book 2, when you read book 2, you may think, oh, there's not as much side romance, but there is a character. We don't see Silas in book 2, so that's why he comes back in book 3. But there's a character who's introduced in book 2 who Aviva has some history with, but has decided would be perfect for Sachi. So I had to sort of layer that in. So things will kick up romance-wise for the side romances in book 3. I had to layer some stuff in book 2, but yeah, Darsh and Silas, I have big plans for them.
Amazing. I
Yeah.
cannot wait.
I'm very excited.
How fast were you planning on writing the rest of the series? When can I expect these?
So book 3 will be out this year for sure. I'm hoping book 4 will be out this year, and then wrapping it up next year in 5 and 6.
Awesome.
So 2 books a year, that's quite
3.
impressive. 3 books a year.
Yeah.
That's quite impressive.
Thank you. I actually write slow compared to all my other indie author friends. I'm a very slow writer, but it is the process that works for me. So I'm like, that's good. That's where I'm gonna stay. It keeps me from getting, I had a bad burnout in the past year, and it's like, okay, I just need to be really mindful of making sure I'm, seeing friends and leaving my living room. Otherwise, it's just, there's nothing there to draw from. So yeah, the 3 books, I'm like, that's a very good schedule. I pace it out well. It works for my editor, which is important to me because we've worked together on, this is our 21st book now. So I value that collaboration so highly. Yeah, so it's like all those factors. But yes, 3 books. That's my long-winded way of saying 3 books.
Well, I'm excited.
Thank you.
I think that's about all the questions we had. As we wrap up, is there something that you would like readers to take away from this book?
I think I want readers to be able. So here's the thing. When I was a kid, I was a reader girl, like I'm sure many people listening to this podcast. But as a Jewish kid, I never saw myself in the pages of any books unless it was Holocaust stories, essentially. And those are very important stories. But I was drawn to fantasy, and I was like, where is the Jewish kid going through that wardrobe? Or, she didn't exist. So I think if people read my books and come away, even though it might be a different magic system or world building or mythology than they're used to, but they come away feeling like they recognize themselves in it, that means everything to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a blast.
Oh, I'm so glad. I loved reading this book and loved talking to you about it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this has been just a wonderful, wonderful time.
Yeah, I had a really good time, and I really appreciate you guys inviting me on.
Before we let you go, you've talked a little bit about current projects. You said that book 2 is being released on your website later this month and going wide in March. But where can you be found on the internet so people who are listening, can keep track of your release dates and buy your books and support you?
So the 2 best places are if you go to deborahwildebooks.com. That has all my books in all the formats, and that's where you'll get the early releases. And, you can sign up and you'll be notified of sales or promo codes, or, I try to do, there's also content, like there's bundles that are cheaper and they're only available there as opposed to the other retailers. So that's a really good place for all my books. If you want to hang out with me, I have a Facebook group called Deborah's Wild Ones. And it is the best group of people. I don't know that I would have survived the pandemic without that bunch. They are snarky and pop culture loving and utterly fabulous. So if that's you, please come find us. Otherwise, I have a Facebook author page, just Deborah Wilde on Facebook.
Thank you again so much. This has been a blast, and I can't wait for book 2.
Thank you very much.
I actually had not realized that book 2 wasn't out yet, and now I'm really sad because I really want to read it. But I have to wait. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye!